Assalamu alaikum, and I welcome you all in our today's session. And I'm very delighted to have you all here. So today we'll have an analysis of the text, tradition, and the individual talent. So we will try to touch on the important issues from this text, and as well as we'll try to explain. And also, I would like to hear your comment from this text. After analyzing, then you can have your own comment. And also, if you don't understand anything, then you can stop me at any point and ask questions. This is the very first paragraph of his text, of his essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent. As you can see, in the first paragraph, he's saying, in English writing, we seldom speak of tradition, though we occasionally apply its name in deploring its absence. We cannot refer to the tradition or to a tradition at most. We employ the adjective in saying that the poetry of so and so is traditional or even too traditional. Seldom, perhaps, does the word appear except in a phrase of sensual. If otherwise, it is vaguely approbative, with the implication as to the work approved of some pleasing archaeological reconstruction. You can hardly make the word agreeable to English ears without this comfortable reference to the reassuring sides of archaeology. So you see here in the first paragraph, he's actually trying to give us an impression about the tradition and how actually English people, they look at this word tradition and how do they consider it. So it's not always very positive. It is not used in that positive sense in English criticism, while actually they're criticizing poetry. So you can see they have to add some kind of archaeological, that's he's saying that reassuring signs of archaeology. So from an archaeological perspective, sometimes they actually see tradition, not from a critical perspective, actually they consider tradition. Now, it's not possible for us to read all the paragraphs, so I will skip some of the paragraphs and then we'll go to the most important ones. Let's see what we have here. Now, as you can look at the screen, it's on page 3. Here, the second paragraph, it says that, yet if the only form of tradition of handing down consisted in the following of the ways of immediate generation before us in a blind or timid adherence to its successes, traditions should possibly be discouraged. We have seen many such simple currents soon lost in the sand, and novelty is better than repetition. Tradition is a matter of much wider significance. So he's saying that tradition, actually, we shouldn't use it for from any parochial perspective. We have to use tradition from a wider perspective. It has a wider significance. He is saying that it cannot be inherited. And if you want it, you must obtain it by great labor. Remember this sentence, that if you want to inherit tradition, it's not possible. That means you cannot, for example, you cannot get it from your father. You cannot get it from your forefathers. If you really want to have tradition, then you have to work for it. That means you have to learn it. You have to obtain it through practice. That's what is tradition. It involves, in the first place, the historical sense, which we may call nearly indispensable to anyone who would continue to be a poet beyond his 25th year. That means 25th year, as a poet, if you're 25 years old, you're just giving a kind of age for our understanding. That he's saying that if you really want to have tradition, then you have to practice it, and you have to practice from the historical sense. That means you have to know the history. You have to know the past of the tradition. That's why he's saying that, and in that sense, from the historical perspective, tradition is indispensable to anyone who would continue to be a poet. So if you really want to be a poet, then you have to know the history of tradition, of your tradition. Then he goes further, he says that not only of the pastness of the past, but of its presence. The historical sense compels a man to write not merely with his own generation in his bones, but with a feeling that the whole of the literature of Europe, from Homer and within it, the whole of the literature, Now, he's saying that it involves in the first place the historical sense, which we may call nearly indispensable to anyone who would continue the whole of the poet beyond his 25th year. And this historical sense involves a perception not only of the pastness of the past. He's saying that it's not only about the past, that I know the past. So it is not the pastness of the past. That the past is there in the past. It's also its presence. That means at present time, you can feel the tradition. At present time, you can feel the presence of the tradition, of the past. That means past is with you in the present time, so that you can understand it. And you have to use it actually when you want to write poetry. Now he's saying that the historical sense compels a man to write not merely with his own generation in his bones. That means when a man who is aware of his history of the past, so he's not only aware of his presence, he also knows that what is his past, what is his tradition. So he will use his tradition to write his, to write poetry. And here he says that not merely with his generation in his bones. So it's not that only he will have his generation in his bones. That means, for example, I'm a poet, and while actually I'm writing poetry, I'm only concerned about a contemporary time, and I only know people from my generation, other poets from my generation. I'm aware of my time, but I'm not aware of my past, of my tradition. So that cannot happen. You have to know your tradition. But with the feeling, now he's saying that you have to know your past and you have to use that past in your present time, in your writing, but with the feeling that whole of the literature of Europe from Homer and within it, the whole of the literature of his own country has a simultaneous existence and composes a simultaneous honor. Now here, you have seen that he is talking about Europe instead of talking about the whole world. So we can see a kind of Eurocentrism in his essay. That means he is giving importance to the European literature, and he said that, he is just writing as a European writer, as a European poet. So he's saying that as a European poet, if you have to have idea about the European tradition. That's what he's mentioning from Homer. So Homer actually is from Greek, so he's a part of the Europe. So he's saying that from Greek literature, from Homer, and within it, the whole of the literature of his own country. So from Homer to his own country. For example, if you're an English poet, so from Homer to, that means from Greek literature to present day literature that is in existence in England. So you have to have some idea about the whole. And within it, the whole of the literature of his own country has a simultaneous existence. So you see, your own tradition, your own literature in England, and the whole literature of the Europe. So they will have a kind of coexistence. So simultaneously, they will exist in your tradition, exist in you. So if you have an idea about the whole of European literature, the tradition, and also the tradition of yours, then you can prove yourself that you're a good writer. Excuse me. This historical sense, that means to know the history of the European literature, this historical sense, which is a sense of the timeless, as well as of the temporal, and of the timeless and of the temporal together. So he's saying that this historical sense is timeless because you are aware of the whole history of the English literature, especially the European literature, so you know everything, so that is timeless. As well of the temporal. Temporal means that it is timeless in the sense of the past, and it is temporal in the sense of the presence. That means it is at the same time it is past, and at the same time it is present. So both are together. So, and this is, he's saying that together, these timeless and temporal, these two senses together will make the writer traditional. Do you understand me what I'm saying? Is it clear to you? Okay. So for example, you know the history of Bangla literature, okay? Not only from Bangladesh, the whole Indian subcontinent. You know the history of Indian subcontinent, literature of the Indian subcontinent. And then you have the idea about the Indian subcontinent literature. Maybe it's in Hindi literature or Urdu literature, literature from Punjab or some other parts of India, and also literature from West Bengal, and also the history of the literature that we have in Bangladesh. So now when you have the knowledge of all this historical background of the literature from this part of the world, and then you have the knowledge of the contemporary literature also, that is the present time literature, that the time that we are living in this 21st century. So you have the knowledge of this 21st century history of the Bengali literature, and you have the knowledge about the whole literature from the past to present, from the Indian subcontinent or Indo-Pak subcontinent, if you want to say in that way. So when you have knowledge about it, then you can say that you are, as a writer, you are traditional. Do you understand it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so when you are a traditional writer, or a writer who is traditional, that means you have the historical sense, you have the knowledge about your tradition of your literature, then he says that, and it is at the same time what makes a writer more accurately conscious of his place in time, of his own contemporaneity. So this is very interesting. He's saying that, and it is at the same time what makes a writer more accurately conscious of his place in time. So when you have the sense of your time, the tradition, you have the tradition in you, and then you can consider yourself that as a writer, you are more accurately conscious of your place in your time. So when you have the knowledge of the tradition, then you can say that as a writer, what kind of writer you are. For example, I have the knowledge of my Bengali literature and also the literature from this Indo-Pak subcontinent. Then I can say that what is my situation, what is my position in literature now at present in the 21st century in Bangladesh, then I can tell it. So, and also you can say that of his own contemporaneity. That means in your contemporary time, you can also compare yourself with the other writers. So as a poet, I can also understand my position, that what kind of poet actually I am, or what kind of writer I am, then I can also understand it. That means you can compare by yourself as a writer with the other poets from the past and the present times, if you have the knowledge of your tradition. Is that clear? Do you need any
Yes,
more
sir.
explanation? Okay, that's
Yes,
great.
sir.
That's great. Now we'll jump to the next paragraph. Now here he says, no poet, no artist of any era has his complete meaning alone. Look at this word. This line is very important. He says that no poet, no artist, no artist of any art has his complete meaning alone. So as a poet alone, you cannot say that I'm an artist. Alone, you will not make an artist. That means you must be a part of a tradition. You have to know your tradition, and then you have to continue that. His significance, his appreciation is the appreciation of his relation to the dead poet and artist, dead poets and artists. So you see, we will appreciate a poet, and we will also find his significance, his importance as a poet, where actually we will find a relation of this poet with the poet from the past. So the dead poets and artists, we will compare, and when we'll find a relation, your writing, we'll find a relation your writing of with theirs, then we'll be able to understand and we'll able to appreciate your writing. Now, you cannot value him alone. So we cannot value, or we cannot evaluate a poet alone. We have to evaluate him with comparison of the other poets from the past. And you must see him for contrast and comparison among the dead. That means, for example, if you want to compare me, if you want to find contrast, if you really want to compare me, or if you really want to judge me as a poet, then you have to compare and contrast with the dead poets. For example, we have lots of poets in our country like Shamsur Rahman or Al Mahmud or Shoaib Qadri. So these are the very famous poets. So if somebody is, or maybe Hilal Hafiz. So if somebody is writing anything, then we will try to compare his writing with the Rabindranath Tagore's writing, or Nazrul's writing, or Satyendranath Datta's writing, or Jivanananda Das's writing, or maybe Shamsur Rahman's writing, or Al Mahmud's writing. So we'll try to compare and contrast. We'll put his writing and at one side, and we'll put the other writings from the past of the literary tradition of Bangladesh. Then we'll try to compare him that in this contemporary time, what's his position, what's his situation, actually, whether his writings are significant or not. So we'll try to evaluate his writings in that. Now he says that, I mean, this is a principle of aesthetic, not merely historical criticism. So he's saying that it's a part of the aesthetic criticism. It's not only something historical criticism. The necessity that he shall conform, that he shall cohere is one-sided. What happens when a new work of art is created is something that happens simultaneously to all the work of art which preceded it. So this is a very interesting idea. I mean, he's saying that when somebody is writing something, it's not that it's only for that particular time. So he shall cohere. That means he will exist in many times. He's not one-sided. His coherence, that means his, you can say his significance, or I mean, his logical acceptance, it's not only one-sided. So he will cohere, he will exist, or will find his writing logical or meaningful. Coherence means something which is meaningful. You will find it meaningful or connected, related, only with the relation with the other writer. So it is nothing one-sided. So what happens when a new work of art is created? So if I create something new, a new poetry, a new kind of poetry, is something that happens simultaneously to all the works of art which preceded it. Precede means that works that we have in the past. So simultaneously, you have all the works from the past and your work in the present. So all these things actually happening together because I am a part of the tradition. So I have learned, I have experienced something from my tradition and I created something new, but that is not in isolation of the tradition. That is also a part of the tradition. It's a continuation of the tradition. So in my writing, I have the tradition. It's not that I'm influenced by them completely, but I'm following the aesthetic sense or aesthetic, issues or components of their writing. So that is his idea. Now he's saying the existing moment for an ideal for an ideal order among themselves, which is modified by the introduction of the new, the really new work of art among them. The existing order is complete before the new work arrives. For order to persist after the supervention of novelty, the whole existing order must be, if ever so slightly altered, and so the relations, proportions, values of each work of art toward the whole are readjusted. And this is conformity between the old and the new. Now, the conformity word, you understand it. And here is the word to persist after the supervention of novelty. Novelty means something new. That means he's saying that if you really want to have some kind of order, I mean, in the literary tradition, then certainly when something is created new, that must be adjusted with the tradition. That means with the past. So when actually we can establish a link, or we can establish a right kind of proportion, then or right kind of relationship, or if that relationship and that is readjusted, that kind of link between the past and the present, then we can have a conformity between the old and the new. Have you got it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That means we have to have.
Okay,
no problem. Here it says that the existing order is complete before the new work arrives. So you see, for example, I want to write something today, a poetry, for example. I want to write a poem today. But before writing my poem, right now at this moment, before that, we are having an order. A literary order is there, right? Until this now, there is a tradition and there is a literary order. Until this time is there. But when I will write a poem, I have to adjust this with the past. So my present work and the old works of the old tradition, then I have both these things, actually, they must be readjusted so that we can have a conformity. We can have a unity between the old and the new. Now, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
sir.
Excellent. Now, whoever has approved this idea of order of the form of European of English literature will not find it preposterous that the past should not be altered by the present as much as the present is directed by the past. Now, in the, just few lines before, he already mentioned that if it is needed to alter the past, or if it is important to change the past, then in that sense also we can have some changes in the present also. Do you understand it? That means a kind of alteration, a kind of change will be there both in the past and also in the present. It's something
Yes, sir.
which is mutual. It's nothing nothing like this. You will only change the past and your present will remain intact. It's not like that. So both will be affected. I mean, in the whole process. So we were in the, sorry, my screen is gone. But I can hear you, but I cannot see the, in any way, I have opened it in another. So we were in the page 3, right? Okay, now I will go further. It's okay now. Now here he says, the existing monuments form an ideal order among themselves, which is modified by the introduction of the new, the really new work of art among them. The existing order is complete before the new order arrives. For order to persist after the supervention of novelty, the whole existing order must be, if ever so slightly altered, and so the relations ever so slightly altered. So if it is needed, actually we can alter them so a little bit. And so the relations, proportions, values of each work of art to the whole are readjusted. So the whole work of art will be readjusted. Then he is saying that whoever has approved this idea of order, of the form of European, of English literature will not find it preposterous that the past should be altered by the present as much as the present is directed by the past. So our present work is directed. That means we get direction, we get advice, we get suggestion, we get ideas from the past. And in doing so, in some cases, if it is needed, we can alter the past, we can change the past a little bit, past tradition a little bit, and it will not find it preposterous. That means will not find it inadvisable, will not find it illogical or audacious that yes, we have changed the past. It's not like that. Slight changes in the past tradition is possible if you really want to create something new and if you really want to be directed by the past. So it's something mutual, I've already mentioned it. Okay, and the poet who is aware of this will be aware of great difficulties and responsibilities. So if a poet is aware of this, this kind of, reciprocity, or we can say this kind of mutual interaction or readjustment between past and present, then he will be aware of the great difficulties and responsibilities. And as a poet, what's his responsibility, he will be aware of it, and also he will be aware of his difficulties as a writer. Now, let me jump to now on the page, it's not same page, the next page, you can jump to the next page. I mean the same page, the difficulties that I've already mentioned. If you just go to, some say the dead writers are remote from us because we know so much more than they did. Could you see these lines? Did you find it? Some say the dead writers are remote from us because we know so much more than they did. Sorry, I cannot move my, so that's actually, you cannot see it, right? Okay, no problem. I'll be reading it and then I'll explain it to you. Now he's saying that someone said the dead writers are remote from us. People say that the writers who are dead, they are very far from us. That means they died many years back. And that's why they don't know as much as we know. So we know better than them because they're dead. So they don't know anything. And we are alive, so we know more than them. Okay? So precisely, and they are that which we know. So, I mean, it's a kind of objection, actually, he is saying that. You see, the objection is that the doctrine recurs a ridiculous amount of erudition, pedantry. That means it needs a kind of this kind of doctrine, it says that it's a kind of pedantic or erudition means a kind of special knowledge. You need some kind of knowledge, academic knowledge. A claim which can be rejected by appeal to the lives of the poets in any pantheon. It says that this claim actually is not true. They knew according to their time, and we know according to our time. So actually, we can reject this idea that dead poets are very remote from us, and they don't know as much actually as we know, because we're alive. That's so. It will end. It will even by affirm that much learning deadens or perverts poetic sensibility. Now, he's saying that if a poet, if he knows a lot, and if he's learning, he's saying that he's very much pedantic, he's very much knowledgeable, he knows a lot, huge, he has a huge knowledge, then he says that it's deadens and perverts poetic sensibility. That means his poetic sensibility, as a poet, his sensibility, it will be affected. While, however, we persist in believing that a poet ought to know as much as will not encroach upon his necessary receptivity and necessary laziness, it is not desirable to confine knowledge to whatever can be put into a useful shape for examinations, drawing rooms, or still more pretentious modes of publicity. Some can absorb knowledge, the more study must swear for it. So he's saying that actually we have to have knowledge, that much is needed to be a writer. So we must, and that is necessary for our receptivity. The much actually we need to be a writer. So we shouldn't have, or we shouldn't, try for the knowledge that much that will affect our poetic sensibility, and in that case we'll not be able to write, because we'll be very much critical about writing, and we'll think about it so much that we'll not be able to write anything. Now, so far actually, he has talked about these, the tradition in this way, and he has manifested his idea of tradition and what does it mean by tradition. He has talked about it in this way, and after this, we will start our discussion in the next session. We will start our discussion about the depersonalization or the theory of impersonality, and we will talk about it in detail. And he has shown us that how this theory of impersonality or depersonalization, which is very much needed for creative work, and how actually it affects a writer or a poet actually while actually he was writing something creative. Now, I would like to open the floor for question or opinion. So if you have any question or any opinion, so far actually we have talked about this tradition. So you can ask me or you can leave your opinion here now. So do you have any question or anything? Or if you want to comment on? Yes, please. Or do you like to add anything, anyone? Of course, you have to read it. You have to read it because the text is, it's full of information. So far tradition, about tradition, so far what I have told, I think that it will help you to understand. When you read it by yourself, then it will help you to understand it from this discussion. So far, we have got idea about tradition. And you know that tradition is very important, according to T.S. Eliot, and how actually we are the part of the tradition, that is also very important. And we will continue this tradition. And without our relation with the tradition, we simply can't create anything new. So first of all, we have to adopt the tradition, and then we have to make the necessary adaptation to create something novel. So that was his idea, because all of us actually, we are the continuation of the past, and we have to readjust our past and present together to create a new world or something novel. Okay, we have less than 30 minutes, so I would like to conclude our today's discussion here. So if you have any question, you can leave it on the Facebook page or your group, then I would love to answer them as soon as possible. Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for your cooperation again, and see you in the next lecture.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.